Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most miraculous political comebacks in literally all of human history. We're talking underground terrorist cells, prime ministers playing high-stakes geopolitical chess, and a pirate-turned-guerrilla who conquered an entire kingdom with, well, almost nothing. This isn't just dry history, folks. It's the ultimate high-stakes heist narrative of how Italy pulled off the impossible.
Okay, let's dive into this. When you and I think of Italy today, we picture this unified powerhouse, right? Seamless culture, amazing food, incredible fashion. A beautiful, single country. But jump back to the year 1840, and if you told someone you were visiting Italy, they'd look at you like you had two heads. That unified reality we know today? Completely non-existent. The actual reality on the ground was gritty, it was fractured, and ruled by foreign empires. I mean, travelers literally needed internal passports just to go a few miles down the road.
For over 1,000 years, the Italian peninsula was essentially just a playground and a battlefield for Europe's giant empires. They fought over it, smashed it apart, and claimed the pieces. The situation was so bleak that Clemens von Metternich, a very powerful Austrian diplomat, famously mocked the very concept of an Italian nation. He said, "Italy is merely a geographical expression." Basically, he completely dismissed the idea that these bickering little states could ever unite into one.
So, how did they prove him wrong? Well, we're going to break this down into 6 stages. First, a mere geographical expression. Second, the fractured peninsula. Third, the puppet master's trap. Fourth, Garibaldi and the Thousand. Fifth, the standoff at Teano. And finally, the birth of Italy. Think of these stages not as some boring academic list, but as the master blueprint for an impossible historical heist.
Stage 1. A mere geographical expression. Assembling the crew.
And this brilliantly illustrates the minds behind the movement. Since the unified country didn't exist yet, 4 distinct archetypes emerged from the shadows to actually pull this off. We've got Mazzini, who acted as the soul of the movement, Cavour providing the brains, Garibaldi operating as the sword, and King Victor Emmanuel II serving as the face. Together, this incredibly unique crew used underground cells, geopolitical chess, and straight-up guerrilla warfare to reunite a deeply divided nation.
Stage 2. The fractured peninsula. The impossible puzzle.
To really grasp the magnitude of what this crew accomplished, we have to look at the suffocating reality on the ground after Europe was carved up back in 1815. Up in the north, Lombardy and Venetia, you had this wealthy industrial core directly occupied by the Austrian Empire, heavily taxed, oppressed by an iron boot. Then in the center, the Papal States, ruled directly by the Pope and fiercely protected by the French military. This place was basically a medieval time capsule. They even banned railroads at first. And down in the south, the massive kingdom of the Two Sicilies, ruled by the Spanish Bourbons. Feudal, impoverished, filled with mostly illiterate peasants. Honestly, the only independent Italian state with an actual Italian ruler was the tiny kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont tucked up in the northwest. That was it.
But hey, the political divisions were only half the problem. The cultural barrier was massive. In 1840, less than 3% of the population actually spoke what we now call Standard Italian. 3%! 97% spoke entirely different regional dialects. A wealthy businessman from Turin literally couldn't understand a fisherman from Naples. But beneath all those language barriers, a shared, simmering rage against foreign occupation was definitely beginning to boil over.
Stage 3. The puppet master's trap. Calculated diplomacy.
That shared rage brings us straight into the shadowy world of secret societies and highly calculated diplomacy. Long before the politicians stepped in, it all started underground. Desperate patriots formed secret groups, most famously the Carbonari. We're talking blood oaths, coded messages, and targeted assassinations to fight their foreign rulers. This raw, explosive passion culminated in massive street rebellions in 1848. But passion and disorganized riots, they just weren't enough. The professional Austrian army marched right in and brutally crushed them. The Italians quickly realized they needed something way more powerful than just passion.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how that underground rebellion evolved into clever subversion. They actually started using classical music, specifically the famous composer Giuseppe Verdi, to hide their true intentions. Patriots would shout or write "Viva V.E.R.D.I." Now, to the Austrians, it looked like they were just cheering for the composer, right? But it was actually a brilliant espionage Easter egg hidden right in plain sight. It was a secret acronym for Viva Vittorio Emanuele Re d'Italia. Long live Victor Emmanuel, King of Italy. They were bypassing Austrian censorship right under their noses.
But let's be real. To actually win, they needed state-level military power. Enter Count Camillo de Cavour, the Prime Minister of Sardinia-Piedmont, the ultimate puppet master of our story. Cavour was a cold, calculating realist. He knew his tiny kingdom couldn't take on Austria alone. So in 1858, he sneaks across the border for a highly classified meeting at Plombières with French Emperor Napoleon III. Cavour brilliantly plays on Napoleon's ego, making a devil's bargain to bait Austria into a trap. And it worked flawlessly. By 1859, Austria took the bait, declared war, and the combined French and Piedmontese armies smashed them, liberating Lombardy. The illusion of Austrian invincibility was finally broken.
Stage 4. Garibaldi and the Thousand. The chaotic invasion.
Okay, so while Cavour is playing this slow, methodical game of chess up north, things completely explode in the south. The pacing of our heist basically turns into a fast-paced action movie right here. 1089. Pause and think about that tiny number for a second. That is the total number of volunteers gathered by Giuseppe Garibaldini, this legendary guerrilla fighter. He didn't care about diplomatic treaties. The man wanted action. In May 1860, he gathers these 1,089 volunteers, and they weren't even soldiers. Mostly young students, lawyers, and poets, wearing these bright red shirts just because they were cheap factory surplus originally meant for slaughterhouse workers. With this tiny, ragtag group, they steal 2 steamships and sail off to invade Sicily.
Just look at the absolutely impossible odds here. Garibaldi's red shirts, 1,089 untrained volunteers, going head-to-head against the Royal Bourbon Army, which had 25,000 professional troops backed by heavy artillery. I mean, on paper, this gamble should have been an absolute immediate massacre.
So, how on earth did Garibaldi pull off this miraculous military sweep? Step 1, land in Sicily. Step 2, utilize his secret weapon, the starving, rebellious local peasants. They saw him as a liberating messiah and joined up by the thousands. Step 3, he used hyper-aggressive, totally unpredictable guerrilla tactics to sweep across the island. And Step 4, he crosses to the mainland and marches triumphantly right into Naples. The massive kingdom of the 2 Sicilies completely collapsed under the sheer psychological intimidation and chaotic speed of this wild invasion.
Stage 5, the standoff at Teano, the climax.
But suddenly, our heist hits a terrifying snag. The political chess game in the north and the wild guerrilla war in the south are now on a direct, violent collision course. Garibaldi was completely unstoppable, and he sets his sights on the ultimate prize, Rome. But up in the north, Prime Minister Cavour is in a state of sheer panic. Why? Because Rome was heavily protected by French troops. If Garibaldi attacked the Pope in Rome, France would absolutely declare war, and the entire European continent would align to crush the Italian unification movement once and for all. To stop a global catastrophe, Cavour convinces King Victor Emmanuel to march the royal army south to intercept the unstoppable Garibaldi.
And that brings us to this intense, suffocating question. Were the 2 Italian factions really about to fight each other for ultimate control? On October 26, 1860, near the town of Teano, the Royal Army of the North and the Red Shirt guerrillas of the South finally meet face to face. Literally everything they had worked for is hanging in the balance right here.
So the crucial point is how Garibaldi responded. In this moment, he proved that his legendary status wasn't just about his skills in warfare, it was about his incredible character. Instead of fighting for absolute power, Garibaldi rides up, tips his hat, and famously says, "I salute the first king of Italy." He selflessly surrendered all of his hard-won southern conquest to the king. He refused any titles, refused any rewards, and just stepped aside to avoid a civil war. Wow.
Stage 6, the birth of Italy, the master plan realized.
That incredible sacrifice brings us to our final stage. The impossible heist was complete. On March 17, 1861, Parliament officially proclaimed the birth of the Kingdom of Italy. Against absolutely all historical odds, those fractured puzzle pieces we looked at earlier were finally forged into one single nation. The dream of the Risorgimento had become a reality.
Let's see how this all builds together. Ultimately, the Risorgimento recipe required perfectly balanced teamwork. It took the passionate soul of a revolutionary in Mazzini, the cold, calculating brains of a politician in Cavour, and the unstoppable, fearless sword of a guerrilla fighter in Garibaldi to actually build the unified country we know and love today.
It really is an absolutely cinematic journey through history, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredible master plan. I want to leave you with this final thought and a question to ponder. Which country's wild origin story should we cover next? Let us know, and I'll see you in the next explainer.